Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 podcast network podcast. So you can go to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. While you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing. The registration is open to the Here We Still Stand regional event in Northwest Arkansas. It has been open for, about 10 days or so. At the time we're recording this, it's over half full, guys. So you're going to want to grab those tickets and if you want to come. And you do want to come because it's 2 days. It's fun. Chad will be there. I'll be there. It's a good place to hang out. If you've never been to Bentonville, Arkansas, which is, of course, it's a good spot. It's a good up-and-coming spot. You won't regret it. You'll like it. And so come hang out. That is April 25th and 26th. So you can find the info in the show notes. Also, while you're over at the website, slide on over. So maybe you've got, you know what, I'm going to register for this conference, which you should do. And while you're registering for the conference and you've got the debit card out, might as well just go over to the donate link. This is a two birds, one stone kind of deal. And go over there, become a contributor. Yeah, you can become a reoccurring donor, make this stuff keep happening, make it all free. We appreciate it very much. And if you already do that, thank you very much. You are the reason that we're able to do this. All right, Chad, we are in the Song of Solomon, chapter 4. We ended with the bride and the groom showing up for the wedding. We got some pretty elaborate details. We've heard a lot from the bride. Last episode, we actually got to hear a lot from Solomon. And, of course, what is he going to talk about? He's going to talk about all the things he loves about his bride. And, of course, they're all physical. He just goes over the entirety of her appearance and talks about all the different parts of her he loves and uses compliments that probably don't translate to modern times. But I'll tell you this, we haven't gotten to it yet, but she's going to take him as compliments. I think she's eating it up.
Yeah, I'm sure she's finally, she's happy that he finally opened up. And he's got quite the elaborate description. He stops in verse 5, he stops at her breast. He doesn't go anywhere beyond that. Later in the Song of Songs, he will. But for now, yeah, that's where he stops. There at 4-5, and then in verse 6, having described all of these beautiful qualities about her body, he goes on to say, "Until the day breeze and the shadows flee, I will go away to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense," which is probably just one more way of describing her body parts. So it's kind of where we end with his physical description as far as the details go. But he's gonna continue. So we got a ways to go here. Verse 7, picking it up there, he says in kind of a summary fashion, "You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you."
I like this verse, Chad.
It's a great verse.
Because I like a verse that isn't true about anybody. I like that kind of verse. And we know what this is like. Maybe if you first, you meet someone and you're starting to get your affection stirred up and you're starting to really like this person. And you might say something like, "She's perfect, man. She's perfect." Maybe you're telling your buddy about her. She's perfect.
Sure.
But you know that, of course, this is not true. That there's no flaw. Come on. No, that's not a real thing. But here's the thing I like about this verse is that, well, we might, you might say to your wife, or I might say to my wife, "You're perfect. There's no flaw in you." They know you're lying. They know that they don't believe that. That's for sure, right? They don't believe that about themselves. It's nice for you to say it. But here's what's cool about this: if you are taking a Christ and his bride approach, is that the only time that this can be said and have it be true is sort of if the groom is talking about his own righteousness, right, which he has now given to you, and then looks at you and says, "You're perfect. There's not a single flaw in you." And this is, in fact, the way that Christ looks at the church. It's without blemish. It is without spot or wrinkle. There is no flaw in it. But this is only because, of course, that he's looking at his own righteousness, which he has gifted and given to the church. And, of course, that righteousness is perfect. And so I like this verse as because there's a lot of like the human elements here we could talk about, and some of it's sort of humorous, and because love is kind of ridiculous when it's this elaborate and exaggerated,
Hmm. Yeah.
and even foolish. I mean, that's like everyone knows that people that are like madly in love are like icky and foolish. You're like, good grief, like just get a room, right? Like you can't do that in
Yeah.
public. But this is one of those times where you have, and this happens throughout the Song of Solomon, where you drop. There's this thing that's dropped in where you're sort of jolted back to remembering that this is ultimately about Christ and His church, and you hear a line like this, and you're like, oh yeah, 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 this is what this really means. Like, of course, that's something some young guy would say to some girl that he was totally in love with, but it's not true. But in the case of Christ and His church, it is true.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. You alluded to the Ephesians 5 text where Christ has loved the church, given himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. And here's the verse, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish.
Sounds like you have no flaws.
No flaws. Yeah. Yeah. Now, of course, anyone who knows what happens in churches in this world might
Yeah,
read that verse and be like, I really like to get to know this church, because
yeah.
that's not the church,
Sign me
not the
up.
church that that,
I'll
that I
go.
know.
I'll become a member.
Yeah. Yeah, because all the churches that I've been in, they have plenty of wrinkles and blemishes, which of course is true when viewed at from our horizontal earthly perspective, of course, because the church is comprised of sinners who are by definition with blemish. But yeah, we're here talking about, well, exactly what Ephesians says, that Christ has made her holy, he's loved her, and he's cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. And he has decked her out in his own robes of righteousness. So just like you could say of Christ, there is no flaw in him, so you can say of his bride, there is no flaw in her. My beloved is mine, and I am my beloved's, right? Just like we saw, I think, in the last episode.
You know what? You know what's great about God, and I think, and I do find it humorous that God does this thing where He's like, okay, there's only one way to please me, right? And that's through faith. And then turns out there isn't any faith, right? Like I'm looking to and fro. Will I find faith on the earth? No, I won't. There's no faith, and dang it, that's the only thing I'm pleased with. This is quite the conundrum here. And so He gives people faith. He gifts it to them. He creates it and drops it in them, and then acts super impressed with this. It says, "Man, that's some good faith. Look at the quality of that. That faith is amazing." And, well, yeah, it's yours. You made it. Like He's very
Right. Yeah.
pleased with
Right.
His own gift, and this is the same way that He did with the church. He's like, "Oh man, the." Looks around and says, "There's a bunch of children of darkness running around. I can't marry any of these. It's off to my son. What am I going to do? I need a flawless bride. I know. I'll take my perfection and then I'll give it to him." Then he's like, man, that's a good looking church.
Yeah. Well, just like in creation, he makes everything, ooh, that's good. That's good. That's good. And then he's like, oh, this is all very good. Well, yeah, of course, you made it.
Yeah.
It's just the way that you want it to be. People do get this impression that the one component of the whole of all salvation that we add is our faith. You know,
Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
I mean, God has done almost everything, and all I got to supply then is the faith. He's got that 99%. I'm going to give that 1% of faith, and then it's a done deal. God's like, no,
No.
no, I'm gonna give you that too. I'm gonna give you. You need salvation, I got you covered. You need righteousness, got you covered. You need peace, wholeness, all that kind of stuff, and you need faith. I got that too.
Well, that's
So,
yeah, one of my. It's a very humorous verse in the Gospels where at one point Jesus is like astonished at someone's faith. Right? He
hmm
says, "Nowhere in Israel have I seen such faith," and you're like, "Yeah." I mean, it's just great that Jesus is astonished by a thing that He creates, right? Where it's like, where do you think that came from?
yep, all the gift of
Like, I
God.
am impressed with what I've done here.
as well he should be.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
So verse 8, he kind of shifts to some mountain imagery, as well as some animal. We got some lions and leopards coming up here. So he says to her, the Solomon speaking to his bride, Christ speaking to his bride, "Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Depart from the peak of Amana." That's one of the peaks in the I did not know what this was. I'd looked this up. The anti-Lebanon range. That's the like on the border of Syria and Lebanon, and it's the headwaters of the Amanus River. But anyway, up north of Israel. Depart from me. Depart from the peak of Amana, from the peak of Sinir and Hermon. So that is, I think most people are familiar with Mount Hermon. It's that tall mountain peak to the north of Israel where it's usually, it's covered in snow. But this is two names for the same thing. So it's about 9,200 feet tall, tall mountain, especially for that part of the world. But Sinir and Sirion, Sirion, and Hermon are all different names for the same place. So it's kind of like Horeb and Sinai, same place, same mountain, but different names. So both of these are kind of from the same area. So depart from, we might say, leave the place that's far away. That's kind of, if you're from the perspective of Jerusalem, these places are way up north. So go from there, go from this inaccessible place and come to me. And then he switches from the mountain imagery to animal imagery. He says, depart from the den of lions, from the mountains of leopards. And I think both kind of the mountain imagery and the lion leopard imagery are just metaphorical ways of saying, go from the place where it's far away and inaccessible and dangerous and guarded and all of that and come to me. So I don't want you far away. I want you close to where I am. So that's verse 8. Then he leaves behind that imagery is pretty typical for poetry. He'll lay it on thick with all of these images from creation, and then he shifts to something else, and that's what happens. Verse 9. He says, "You have captivated my heart." Other translations will say something like "stolen my heart" or "you have ravished my heart." Any kind of real intense romantic imagery that you want to use there. That's what's happened. She has completely hijacked his heart, taken it captive. You've captivated my heart. My sister, my bride. Now, that sounds strange to our ears, as does a lot of this, because I never refer to my wife as my sister, just like I'm sure most guys don't refer to their wife as their sister. But this is pretty common in ancient poetry, where you can refer to your lover or your wife as your sister without any kind of, I mean, we hear that, we think in terms of incestuous stuff going on. That's not in any way implied here. All this saying is this is just kind of a pet name, my sister, my bride, my love, all kinds of language used to describe the one who is near and dear to his heart. So you've captivated my heart, my sister, my bride.
Chad, you and I are a lot of things in relation to Christ. So we would be one of the ones that's weird to us is that we're the bride of Christ. It's a little weird for you and I.
Yeah, strange.
We're also Christ is our elder brother.
Mm-hmm.
That's less weird.
Oh,
Where you're like, yeah,
less weird.
that's my
Yeah.
older brother. Now, for a woman, and you say, hey, you're the bride of Christ, that probably doesn't feel as uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But if Christ is my elder brother, that would make me his younger brother. But if your wife Stacy, if Christ is her elder brother, that would make her his little sister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she remains also the bride of Christ.
Yeah.
There you go. And so like if you're thinking about the context of the church, like yes, you could be both sister and bride to Christ. In fact, if you're a woman, you are both of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just have to get comfortable with what might initially strike you as just kind of a strange and uncomfortable mixing of images.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's our relationship to God is described in different ways. We're his servants. Yeah, it's very true. But we're also his friends.
Mm-hmm.
We're also his children. We're also brothers and sisters in Christ. We're also part of his bride. And I think all of these are just trying to capture with various images from creation, various relationships we have, exactly who we are to him.
Well, I mean, or think about this. I mean, I know women don't like this. I mean, at least a lot of the women I've talked to, just the wives don't like what I'm about to say, and I'm sorry about that. It's just what the Bible says. A lot of wives don't like this idea that, in the new heavens and new earth, this whole husband and wife arrangement is not going to be a thing. According to the scriptures, marriage is an earthly institution. This is not something that you're going to carry with you.
No marrying or giving in marriage and resurrection, as
Yeah,
Jesus tells us.
this is how it is. So what is Stacy to you, Chad? She is your wife, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps a more eternal relationship is that she is in fact your sister in Christ. I mean, this is true. Is that if you're a married couple and you're both believers, that yes, that you have a spouse, you have a husband, or you have a wife, but what you permanently have is a brother or sister in Christ.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense of the imagery here. It's kind of it's the eternal perspective that's being offered. So she's back to verse 9. She has captivated his heart in fact, with one glance of your eyes. That's all it took. One look, love at first sight, as we might say. You've captured my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. So one look at her, and he's smitten. In other words, that's all it took. His heart was immediately stolen. Verse 10, how beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your oils than any spice. We've seen this comparison of love to wine, the intoxicating nature of love more than once, and we'll see it some more in the song as we go on. But just reaffirming what he's already said before, that being in love with her is more intoxicating than any wine on earth could ever make him. And then, we kind of get back to the sensual imagery here in verse 11. Of course, all the descriptions of everything from her eyes to her cheeks to her hair to her neck to her teeth to her breast in that opening section was very, very sensual, with some double entendres going on there with some of this. But here he's going to shift back to that, and he says, your lips drip nectar, my bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. Put that on your Valentine's Day card.
Hey, those
some pretty sweet kisses.
Sweet
pretty
nectar.
sweet kisses going on there. Yeah.
That's hey man, nectar is not a word that you use a lot. When
no, I mean we might talk about honey. I mean, I don't use this language, but it's, if you see somewhere some romance poetry or whatever, you have your lips are like honey, your honeyed kisses. Yeah. All right, I could see that. Sticky sweet. But milk, maybe not so much.
Nectar is just like that. That's like your lips are like some super ripe fruit, man. Like I feel like if I go take a bite of that, I'm gonna have, it's not gonna be one of those,
sugar rush.
Well, you ever got a peach out of season, and then it's like a peach that's not ready to be eaten is the worst. It's all it's all like hard, not sweet. It's terrible.
Yeah, so disappointing.
Yeah,
but it's like you're expecting the very best and you get the worst.
Or a plum for that, like a plum that's like ready to, like the ripe plum is amazing. Mm-hmm. Like you almost can't believe that nature exists in nature. Like how does this even happen? Yeah. And that's what he's saying. Like, he's saying these lips look like they're ripe. They're like if I go get a bite of that, I'm gonna have nectar dripping down my face.
Yeah. Yep. Time for some sweet kisses.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he's describing here, with her lips are dripping nectar, and honey and milk are under her tongue. And not only that, but she smells really good too, because the fragrance of her garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon.
And Lebanon really gets a lot of cred. You know, I mean, he
A
tells her.
lot of
I mean, he
cred
tells
in the
her.
Bible and the ancient Near East in general.
Yeah,
It's the place to be.
I mean, he tells her that she's got to leave there to come to where he is, but also consistently, you're like, I don't know, sounds pretty good, man. Like anytime you're complimenting something, it's like the blank of Lebanon. It's the trees, it's the smells, it's the. I mean, I don't know what's going on there. Apparently, back in the day, that was a good place to be. Or at
Place to
least, you know
be.
what, they had a lot of resources that were desirable.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would have said back in that day, can anything good come from Lebanon?
No,
Because the response would have been, what are you talking about? Everything comes from Lebanon. Yeah. Lebanon is the place to be. So she smells like Lebanon. She tastes like nectar and honey and milk. He's obviously enjoying himself. So verse 12 is going to shift again, verse 12 and 13, and well, really on to 15. We're going to have some more kind of fruit imagery, but also spices and garden imagery. So I'll just go ahead and read the next 3 or 4 verses, beginning with 12. A garden locked is my sister, my bride. A spring locked, a fountain sealed. Your shoots are an orchard. Orchard, by the way, is pardes. It's where we get paradise from. It doesn't mean that here, but eventually that becomes it's taken into Greek and paradise, which we usually associate, of course, with Eden. That's where we get our word for that Persian word. So your shoots are an orchard, a paradise, I might say, of pomegranates with all choicest fruits, henna with nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all choice spices. And then we're back to the garden. That's where he ends this. A garden, fountain, a well of living water and flowing streams from, any guesses where these flowing streams would come from?
I'm
Let's
guessing.
see.
I'm guessing it's not flowing from any other place but one place.
It's got to be Lebanon. Yeah, that's it.
It
So we
wasn't Nazareth, huh? Wasn't the flowing
certainly no
streams?
no no
Was
flowing streams coming from Nazareth.
no
Everything good comes from Lebanon.
no paradise of orchards in Galilee. None of that going on.
None of that. None of that. So most commentators who are describing this section say this is actually all leading up to what's going to be coming next, which we'll get to in just a minute, where there's an invitation basically to visit the garden, to eat its choicest fruits. So, and it makes sense that all of this description that we covered last time of the various parts of her body and what we've just talked about in this episode and what I just read with all the smells and the taste and everything and with the description of a garden, that this is all leading up to what's going to be kind of the consummation. So most people will explain this is all leading up to the consummation of the marriage. And it makes sense. I mean, there's been a lot of language in here about bride, which is new. So I think it was verse 9 where we first saw this. No, it was verse 8. My bride, verse 9, my bride, verse 10, my bride, verse 11 and 12, also my bride. So it's kind of you can picture a lot of this as sort of I don't know, a wedding night poem, we might say.
Well,
You
I
know,
mean, and
the
then,
marriage is ended and he's walking arm in arm with her to the bedroom kind of idea. And he's just like waxing poetically about her body and with all of the various parts of nature drawn into the poetry to describe who she is. And he ends with this image of a garden or a spring or a fountain. The reason it's described as locked is because it's inaccessible. You can't get to it, but it's about to be unlocked.
yeah, that's what I was gonna
Like,
say. That's what.
it's about to open up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he starts by saying like, "Come on over here." Like up till this point, there's got this. There's this garden. There's this spring. There's this fountain, and they're locked up. But I'm about to
Got the key.
about to pull out this key and unlock all that. And yeah,
Yeah.
that seems pretty obvious that that's
Hmm.
what's going on there.
Yeah, that's it. Garden imagery is pretty common in ancient Near Eastern love poetry. Hey, it makes sense. I mean, you think of a beautiful place with all kinds of trees and flowers and herbs, and it looks beautiful. It's enticing. It smells wonderful. You know, when you go in that you can, pluck the fruit from the trees, you can enjoy yourself. It's usually cool. All of this is just a perfect way to describe this woman who's waiting for him to enter into the garden and to enjoy being there, enjoy being there with her. So it's locked. The spring's locked, the fountain's sealed, but yeah, now he's walking inside. And she just, I don't think there's a lot we need to say about the various parts of this. You have orchard of pomegranates, you got all the choice fruits, you got all of these various spices, henna, and I mean calamus, cinnamon, trees of frankincense, myrrhs, aloes, so on and so forth. So every good smell that you can imagine, every good taste that you can imagine is there. And it's a place not where it's dry. There's these rivers of, wells of living water. That's a John 4 imagery there. Living water is running water. So it's not like a stagnant pool where you look into it and you're like, I don't want to drink that. It's just like these cascading, living waters. So that's how he describes her. And then at the very end, we have a couple of verses, and it's debated as to who says these. So she might be saying, "This awake, O north wind, and come, O south wind, blow upon my garden and let its spices flow." Or he might be saying it. We're not sure. It really doesn't matter whether she says it or whether he says it. She's going to speak in probably the closing couple of lines. So this is the very end of 16. We kind of come to this consummation moment. Awake, O north wind, and come, O south wind, blow upon my garden, let its spices flow. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its choicest fruits. So there you go. I mean,
Dude, that's just bring it on language.
that's definitely bringing on language. Yeah. This is the door to the bedroom has closed, and they are in each other's arms. That's exactly what we have come to now. So she welcomes him, in other words. The garden is locked, but she says, "Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its choicest fruits." So they are finally together in this paradise, in this garden, and they are enjoying the gift of one another's love. And that's the end of chapter 4. I don't know that we need to add very much. I mean, you get to the point where it's like you you know what's happening here, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because the way that you might be like, oh, it's kind of a weird way for four to end, but actually ends in the right spot, I think, because five, you like fast forward. It's like you get imagine you're watching a movie and you're starting to get uncomfortable because you have a feeling about what's about to happen, and you're like, ooh, and you're like, you need to get fast forward. You got to cover your kid's eyes. I don't know, whatever it is you got to do. And
Yeah.
but then it just jumps. Scene jumps, and you are now after the fact. This is how
Yeah.
4 and 5 worked.
Yeah. And I remember this one of my favorite novels is Les Mis, and there's this one line where the lovers on their wedding day are, they're walking hand in hand into the bedroom, and you're like, okay, is he going to go further? But I wish I could quote it from memory. But he basically says, and the door closes, and then he adds some line like, "And dear reader, we will not enter therein." It's just
Yep.
kind of leaving it there. Uh, so this is another one of these chapter divisions where it really should have gone on into five, because 5:1 is the closing scene here. And this is where, so she said all this, enter the garden, enjoy, eat its fruits, enjoy yourself. He says, verse 5, I came to my garden, my sister, my bride. Well, there he makes it explicit, right? He calls his sister and his bride his garden. This is where he's at. And what did he do while he was there? He says, I gathered my myrrh with my spice. I ate my honeycomb with my honey. I drank my wine with my milk. And then we have this closing couple of lines, which is mostly interpreted as kind of this chorus. And it's not like they're there, but they're just like kind of in the background singing, affirming what's happening. And they say, eat, friends, drink, and be drunk with love.
Now, doesn't it? To me, this is how I read this. Like that. So the first verses of chapter 5, he doesn't say that he's going to do this. He says that he did do this. Like, I came to my garden, like I gathered, ate, drank. This is all past tense. Like, this is something that I did. Almost like, imagine. This is super weird to us, I suppose, but if you have, like, I don't know, like a royal marriage, and a marriage ain't really a marriage until it's consummated.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't know, like, who knows what all like the traditions and stuff at this time are in this place, but imagine you consummate this marriage, you come out, and people need to know,
Mm-hmm.
and basically, in my mind, you have here the groom coming out and saying, like, it is done. Like, I've done
Mm-hmm.
this thing, I've done this thing, I've done this thing, and everyone's like, all right, well, we got a queen now. Like, everybody, it's time to party, right? So they say,
Yeah.
hey, everyone
Yeah.
eat, everyone drink. It's done, which is a
Yeah.
weird thing. Like I said, it's like a guy coming out, I guess, and telling all his friends, like, mission accomplished. you know?
Right. Yeah. 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 I mean, so you kind of take a step back from this and you think in terms of Christ and his church. I mean, I can think of at least a couple different ways in which, even though this is not the way we ordinarily speak about this relationship, it fits. I mean, you ultimately, I mean, let me start at the end. You had the marriage supper of the Lamb, right? You had the
Mm-hmm.
marriage feast of the Lamb when you finally, it's a consummation of all things, literally, when Christ returns and the New Jerusalem ascends from heaven like a bride adorned for her husband. You have this coming together of Christ with his church in the new creation, and all of this language would apply to that. But I mean, we have foretaste of that every time the church gathers with church as a bride gathers with Christ her groom at the supper. I mean, this is all of these are a foretaste of the feast which is to come. So you could even take this language of the end of 4 and beginning of 5 and apply it to the supper as well, where it's a marriage feast. And yeah, we're awaiting that final feast, but even now we are enjoying this meal with our beloved, this coming together, this intimate union of Christ and his bride here in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
But
Well,
then it seems like she goes to sleep, and like typical guy fashion, he just like gets up in the middle of the night and vanishes.
yeah, this is so I think I'm pretty sure I can say this with 100% certainty that this section coming up is one of the one of the stranger sections of the song. So this is going to be another one of these themes of searching the city. And we saw this, what was that, back in chapter 3, where she goes in search of her beloved. Where's he at? And she's searching the highways and the byways. She's searching the streets and the alleyways of this town, and she sees the guards out. She talks to them. Have you seen my beloved? And finally she finds him, right? Brings him home. Well, this is another one of these kinds of scenes, except the parallels end and things get kind of strange toward the end because she gets beat up by the guards of the city. So that, man, you read the studies on songs, and they take this all kinds of different ways. I don't know. One of the commentaries I read understood this whole thing to be a highly metaphorical description of her losing her virginity. And I read his exposition, I read his arguments. It just I didn't buy it. I don't think that I think the language here is a bit would be pressing it too much to describe their wedding night. So
Well,
I don't go that route.
so I probably didn't look at all the commentaries like you did, Chad. But here the thing is that the church has Christ, but ever since the ascension, the church is anticipating the return of Christ and asking Christ to
How
return.
long, O Lord?
Yeah,
Yeah.
asking Christ to return.
Come quickly, Lord Jesus.
And as the bride of Christ, even though we are explicitly told where to find him until he ultimately comes and returns for us. What is certainly true of the church in all times is that they get distracted and oftentimes look for him where he is not said to be.
Yeah.
And we do this today, of course. And you're sort of looking for Jesus in places that he hasn't said that you can be certain to find him, as you wait for him to, come and take you home. Is that what's going on here? I don't know for sure. I can't say for sure that's what the analogy is that. But I think it works somewhat because I do think that in a lot of these quests that you might go on to go get a little hint of Jesus somewhere, go try to find Christ somewhere, you do end up just getting beat up because he's not said that that's where he is, and you will leave disappointed and maybe find something you weren't looking for,
Yeah.
or some kind of false Christ or whatever. And that is kind of how the gospel narrative works, is that Christ has come. He has accomplished his mission to have his bride, to obtain his bride. And now he is not with us. He is found in certain places in the word and in the supper and in baptism, this kind of stuff. But physically, we are waiting for his return. And the church is, from the very beginning, little secret here, guys, every generation believes that this must certainly be the generation that Christ is going to return for his bride, going all the way back to the very first Christians. That you're like, surely he will come for us, right? And so I don't know. That's one way I look at it. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense of all the language, but maybe makes sense of the overall theme of this section.
Yeah, well, we didn't talk about this before we started recording, but it turns out we're both on the same page there. Yeah, I think this is well. So I know we don't have time to read the verses yet, but this is kind of I guess a prelude for what we can talk about next time. But you think about how many times in the scriptures Christ calls his church, wanting her to come to him, and in Song of Songs, in these verses in chapter 5, he's going to knock on the door. And at first she doesn't want to get up. Well, I'm already in bed. I don't want to get my feet dirty. I want to get dressed. And I think there's a direct reference to this in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, where Christ, speaking to the church of Laodicea, says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." I'm here. So it fits with many times in Isaiah, as well as even in the Gospels, where Christ is knocking, he's calling, he's waiting, and he's wanting his bride to come to him. And sometimes when she does, she looks from the wrong places. And that I think it flows with these verses, whatever this is, next 8 verses of chapter 5. Fits with the overall framework of that. We'll unpack that some more next time, but that's kind of the direction we're going with this. Christ shows up, he knocks, he calls, and he's waiting for his church to answer and to find him the place he's promised to be.
All right. Look at us not talking about it beforehand, on the same page. It's great. The Holy Spirit must
love
be
it
really
when it works
active
out that way.
today.
It must be.
So, all right, man. Well, I will see you next episode.
All right. See you then.